If you would like to give to North Augusta Church, we would appreciate it. There are multiple ways to do that. There's a hole in the back you can drop check in. You mail it to the P.O. box. You can look in the YouVersion notes. There's a way to do that online. Or just, hand money to Lane. That would be fine too. You know what? I wrote a sermon for this week. I feel like it's pretty good. I think we're going to do it next week. And if you will indulge me, I think I'd like to just talk about my dad for a minute, if that's okay. If you don't know, my dad passed away last Saturday. It was a bit unexpected. He'd been having some health problems, a little bit more than I knew. He had started falling again, which he hadn't done since he had his surgery. Apparently, it was bad enough that my sister got him to go to the doctor where they said, your blood work's all bad. Here's what we're going to do to try to start getting on top of it. And then a few days later, he was gone. I'll just pull up the eulogy I did for his funeral. I'm not going to read that directly or anything, but I'll kind of use it as a guide. Dad's been a preacher my whole life. I used to joke that every time that the doors were unlocked, literally, like if they just went up there to vacuum, I was at the church building because that's where my parents were. When I was a sophomore in college, my dad went on a mission trip to Ukraine. He did it in conjunction with a university out of Montgomery, Alabama. And they worked through a language institute, so they all had translators. It was a really neat trip. He hadn't done anything like that before. And when he came back, he seemed more alive than I've seen him in a long, long time. Just couldn't stop talking about this experience that he had, and he told me at one point when I asked him about it, he said, it was great, and you're going back with me. And I said, no, I'm not. Capping off a series of events where I said I wasn't doing something that I wound up doing. So 6 months later, I'm getting on a plane to go to Ukraine, and we spend like about a month there. And it was kind of life-altering in a lot of ways because, just the perspective of going somewhere that's different than your culture and that kind of thing, going there with my dad, going there where faith looked different, felt different, had a different context, where people were kind of having to fight to have a faith. People who would go to church with their parents laughing at them. People who get kicked out of their building that they're meeting in by the government, and so they meet in the park in the rain because it's so important to them. So anyway, I'm sorting through all this when I get back, and hear the same old stories about churches in America splitting over disagreements about carpet color and that kind of thing. It's really sort of disconcerting, and so you have this crisis of faith where you go, okay, then I'm either going to walk away from this because it doesn't matter, or I'm going to treat it like it does. And so I decided I was going to go into ministry. I was going to go into youth ministry first. And so, and I think my dad's just going to think this is the coolest thing in the world. So I called him up and said, hey, I'd like to come see you, take you to lunch. I'll meet you at your office. And so I drive home 45 minutes from Troy to my dad's office. And I go in, and we're going to have this hallmark moment. I've got this thing planned out in my head. And I tell him that I'm changing my major over to psychology, and I'm going to use it to go into ministry, and I think that churches would help me get Bible education. And he looks up at me and he says, well, if you can do anything else, you should do it. I said, what? And he goes, don't misunderstand me. He said, you got the skill set, I think you can be really good at it, but unless you have something from inside you that compels you to do this to where you can't do anything else, then you don't need to do it. Because if you don't have that compulsion, this job will chew you up and spit you out. So he said, I think you can do it, but I want you to ask yourself if you've got that. Because if you don't, it's fine. That's totally respectable, and you'll do amazing at all kinds of fields. But if you can't do anything else, then you got to do this. And he's, had my back the whole time. I talked to him on Friday. I've been meaning to call him all week, but Emma was coming in for Easter. She had stayed at college last year for Easter, and she said that was just depressing, so she was coming home for the weekend. So she was driving in, and it was taking forever, and I was holding dinner for her, but it wound up holding dinner way longer than I understood when I offered to hold dinner. And so I'm just killing time, and I decided to go ahead and call my dad while we're waiting. And so we wound up talking for a while. It was I checked my phone history. It was 9 minutes. So for 9 minutes, we had this pretty routine conversation, just catching up. Dad told some of his patented, my girls call them papa jokes. They're like a subset of dad jokes. It's extra corny, and it's notable for how much he enjoys the groan he got in response. And then we told each other we loved each other, and we said goodbye. And, I kind of treasure those 9 minutes. It wasn't anything amazing, but also it is amazing because whether I knew it or not, I got to say goodbye to him. If you didn't know him very well, and most of you didn't, I wish you could have. I wish you could have seen how many people came in just to sit in this little funeral home in Greenville, Alabama, which is exactly what you pictured when I said Greenville, Alabama. How they drove from states and states away just because they wanted to sit there and honor somebody who had been important to them. How he really had this habit of making people family who weren't related by blood. And it was such a good experience. I mean, sad beyond belief, but so good for people to come together and for them to, through their tears, talk about love and talk about what kind of goodness was there. You guys know that not every year, but most years at one point I get on a soapbox about gratitude because I really got into some research about that, and I really believe in it. And we got like Thanksgiving on the calendar, so it sort of begs the question. But several years ago when I started doing that, one of the things that I did, one of the things we talk about when we talk about gratitude is we talk about writing a gratitude letter. And what a great practice that is, to where you write somebody this letter and you tell them what you're, with specifics, what you're grateful for, like what you're grateful for in their life that they've done. And so, because I don't just, say this stuff, one of the things I did is I wrote my dad one for his birthday, and I think it was 2014. And so when I was putting together this eulogy, I ran across it. And I'd like to read it to you, if that's okay. Because I think it gives you a good idea of who he was. Now, when I wrote this, I never thought that I would be reading it to lots of people. It was just for him. But I don't think he would mind. I wrote him, and it says, Dad, I'm writing this letter for your birthday, but really I'm just using that as an excuse to say some things that I've needed to say to you for a while. But I haven't quite found the right way or time to do so. I'm so grateful that I have you specifically as my father. Seriously, I thank God that I got to grow up with you as my dad. No, you weren't perfect, but you never claimed to be. What you were and are is good. You are an authentically good man. You care about people. You give of yourself. You build other people up. You invest in other people. You love with your whole heart even when it hurts. The world is a better place because you are in it and because of what you've done with your life so far. I can't wait to see what else God does through you as you continue to say, "Here I am," when he calls you. Speaking of God, there's something else I want to say. Thank you for the God that you showed me. I believe, and there's quite a bit of research to back this up, that children develop their initial concepts of God based on their own father. A lot of people have to work very hard to overcome that. I was blessed with a father who showed me grace, patience, and love. I was blessed with a father who steadfastly saw me through the lenses of love and grace even when I was pretty unlovable. I was blessed with a father who provided guidance and discipline because he cared about the man that I would grow up to be. My hardwired basic concept of God the Father looks a lot like that, and I believe that's a very good thing. I know that you and I had different opinions and interpretations on various points of doctrine and theology, but even the ability to do that is a gift from you in some ways too. You always told me that I shouldn't just take your word for this stuff, that it was so important that I had to explore for myself and wrestle with the questions. I've got kids of my own now, and I realize how scary that must have been at times and may still be. But I have never felt like our relationship was in jeopardy if I came to different answers in an honest search for truth. The older I get and the more people I meet, the more I realize what a gift that is, and I can't thank you enough for it. You and Mom modeled authentic faith, and I'm grateful that I had the privilege of growing up seeing that. In you, I saw a faith that was real and that mattered. I saw a faith that persisted in the face of uncertainty. I saw a faith that persisted even when your heart was broken. I saw a faith that enabled you to be something better, something truer, even when other people didn't appreciate you and treated you in ways that were less than honorable. With your life and character, you showed me that being good was a matter of integrity, not a matter of figuring out what people deserved versus what they didn't. A lot of people I know never had these lessons modeled for them, especially by their fathers, but I did, and I'm incredibly grateful. I'm a father now, and from this vantage point, I can see so many things that you did for me that I could neither see or properly appreciate when I was younger. You showed me what a nurturing father looked like. Actually, I never knew anything else. Because of you, my assumption was that fathers nurture their children. Dana tells me that this is actually quite rare. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize how right she is. I love our girls, and in a very real way, I learned how to do that from you. There was never really a question of whether or not I would be involved at their schools. I did it because I remembered that you were just always there, even though I didn't always appreciate it at the time. When I look around at their schools, I realize that for the most part, dads are conspicuously absent. It reminds me of how blessed I've been. I had you. So for all the times I didn't say it, for all the times I didn't understand enough to know how richly I had been blessed, for the example that you set me, and for all of the life that you poured into me, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so grateful that I get to call you Dad. I love you. Your son, Adam. You don't get points or a mapped out sermon this time, so you get whatever points come to me while I'm talking. I'm so grateful that I followed the impulse to give him a call Friday night. It was out of nowhere. It could have easily passed. I'm so grateful that I took the time to write that out to him in 2014 and sent it to him, that he read it and that he knew, and that I didn't wait to put it together until after he was gone. We had that conversation. I knew we weren't dealing with a ton of time, but I thought probably we had another decade or so. When I talked to him Friday night, he had a little bit of a cough. They sounded great. Part of what I had trouble wrapping my mind around on Saturday morning is we thought We were just misunderstanding something. He, one of the things I kept thinking about while we were at the funeral is that I really kind of felt sorry for my dad because my dad is great at funerals. I'm great at funerals. And so I was kind of sorry that my dad didn't have my dad to do his funeral. I saw him, when my grandmother's second husband died. I remember that Dad got up and did part of the funeral. And I remember being stunned that he could do it. You know, to have something that is that emotional for you and to have your mom right in front of you just brokenhearted. I remember just being in awe of that. But he did. He got up and he did it. And it was emotional and beautiful and true. And then in the middle of it, he did this thing where he told this story. And it was this self-deprecating story where he made himself kind of the butt of the joke, but it perfectly captured Jim, his mom's husband. It perfectly captured Jim's sort of gruff teddy bear personality, and the place broke apart. Like, they just cracked up. And I remember these people laughing through their tears, and the air in the room got lighter. And it's like they could breathe. And it's not that they weren't sad. It's that it's like he gave them permission to remember the person fondly. It's like he gave them permission to move on with the ache of the loss, but to not let the breaking of it take over. It was the closest thing to magic I've ever seen in real life. So Monday night, when we went to bed, it's weird when you get news like this. It's at least in this situation, you're not at all prepared for it, no matter how many scenarios you kind of run through your head, and you're sort of playing catch up, and you go into autopilot task mode, and you get stuff done. First thing we did before we got on the road is I had to go buy a suit. I have a suit. I wore it to Dana's grandmother's funeral, and it looked like about 4 of me could fit in it. So we were like, we got to do something else. So we ran out and bought a suit, and we walked in, and we've never shopped for a suit. I think my mom bought me that suit. I'm a different kind of preacher. My children are still shocked when they find ties in the closet. But we walk in, and Dana just says, "That's your coat size," and she was right. She didn't know it was my coat size, but she knew my coat size. So we got all that, and I went down. But you're on kind of autopilot, and you're clicking through, and you're taking care of other people, and you got to get stuff done. And you're kind of shell shocked for a while. And so we got down there, and we're taking care of my mom, and we're getting things set up for the funeral. And we go to bed that night, and we're just exhausted, because nobody's sleeping. And after we lay down, it's just me and Dana, I just fall apart. Just cried for hours. I have never been that sad in my entire life. And Dana just held me and let me do it. And I didn't think I was ever going to stop crying. And then I remembered something from earlier in the day. Since my dad had been wrestling with the Parkinson's, even after he had the surgery, there was the electric brain stimulation stuff, he would walk with a cane. A walker sometimes if it was bad, but most of the time he would get around with a cane. And so all over the house, I think I saw 2 or 3 of the CVS style kind of canes, the basic. Most of them were these wooden kind of carved rustic looking canes. Which suits him, like if you knew him. That's even when we were picking out the coffin, we were like, it was like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when they're picking out the Holy Grail. We're like, no, that's fancy. That's not it. That's the one, the simple. That's my dad. And so all over the house there are these, I don't know, when he thought he was going to use all the canes or if he just liked variety, but there's canes everywhere. And so right by the door, there's this little container, and it's got a bunch of the wooden canes sitting in it. In the middle of it, there's this one that's different than any of the other in the house. There's this slick-looking, like, black cane. It's got a silver tip on it. There's, like, this ornate silver handle that's in the shape of a dragon with all kind of detail. And so, like, I walk in, and my mom's on the couch, and I'm like, I pick it up, and I'm like, Mom, what's the deal with the fancy cane? And she gets this weird look on her face, like she's been so sad the whole time, but she gets this weird smile on her face, and she looks at me, she goes, oh, that's your dad's. And then she kind of nods at the cane, and she makes this movement like she's opening a jar. And so I grab the handle of the cane, and I turn it, and it twists. And I pull out a sword. It's a sword cane. My dad, the king of corny jokes, has a sword cane. And so I'm thinking about my dad going around with this secret ninja sword hidden in his cane, like he's going to jump to somebody, defend somebody's honor, and I'm half kidding, but I'm only half kidding. And I just started smiling, and I couldn't stop smiling. And then I started laughing, and I couldn't stop laughing, thinking about my dad going around with this sword cane, like, because it was, my first thought was like, that's so Batman. That's so 007. And then I thought, no, that's so the kind of silly, frivolous thing that I would justify buying myself. That's where I get that from. And it gave me a minute to where I could, even in the very real sadness, even in the very real grief, I could smile and I could remember him fondly. And the loss is still there. It's like there's a hole in the world, There's an absence that makes you realize how profound the presence was. But you keep breathing. And you look and you see the influence. You look and you see all the good, the legitimate good that's there. These people who came in and who just want to hug you and they just want to say, I know he's your dad. But my dad left my family when I was a kid, and he was my dad too. He was there for us. I know he was your dad. I don't want to take that away from you, but he gave me hope. He took care of me. He showed me Jesus. He baptized me. After 9/11, when the rest of us were kind of wrestling with our feelings about national tragedy, my dad went and volunteered with the Red Cross to do crisis counseling for the victims and for people left behind. He became a police chaplain. One of the main things that he did was help make notifications to families when tragedy struck, because he didn't want the police officers to have to do it themselves, and he didn't want people to, he really cared about the people who were receiving the news and how they received it. He worked for over 40 years, somewhere between 40 and 45. I had trouble actually figuring out the exact number. At a summer camp, because he wanted kids to know Jesus. That was like his decision-making about what he did there. He went way past when his health made that comfortable for him, because he wanted those kids to know Jesus. And then when it became too much, he supported somebody else and helped them in every way he could who he thought cared about it as much as he did, because he wanted them to know Jesus more than he even wanted them to know himself. It's important to look at the people in your life and celebrate the good that's there. It's important to talk to people and to let them know what you appreciate specifically about them while they can hear it. It's important to let yourself be inspired by the good that's been done by people who've gone ahead of us. It's important that if a relationship in your life isn't what it's supposed to be, that you find grace and you find forgiveness and you find healing for that and you find a way back to each other. Because as cliche as it may sound, you aren't promised another minute. And you're wasting time. And it's time that you can't get back. I know you're only in control of what you do. I know you're not in control of what somebody else does. But as far as it depends on you, you need to make it right. You need to make it right, because one of the cool things about this whole experience, I am heartbroken about it. I am sad. I miss him like I can't even tell you. But honest to God, there aren't any regrets. Man lived his life like he wanted to live it. Gave it to something good. Made sure all the relationships in his life were right. And it was an end that came quicker than I wanted it to. But it was beautiful. And part of the reason it was beautiful is because he did the work. He treated people like they mattered. The Apostle Paul says that these three remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. My dad believed him. And his life shows it. And I want to believe God like that. I want to believe God like that. That the greatest of these is love. That it is the thing that's eternal, and I want to make decisions in my life that show I believe that lean into that. Because that's what matters. All our petty pretense, all our bickering, it's ridiculous. It's spiritually immature, it's ridiculous. It serves no good purpose. It's poison. What I want for you is to be able to have that life without regret. What I want for you is to be able to love the people you love and allow yourself to be loved by them. What I want for you is to spend your life, your time, your resources, your energy, your love on things that are good and things that matter, so that when you get to the end of it, you can know, and the people around you can know, that was a life well spent. So I don't know if any of this made any sense, but thank you for giving me like a group therapy session if that's what we're doing. It does help to talk about it. So may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. The church said together.